The court doctor shifted the stethoscope with a serious expression, and 15 minutes later he finally pulled away the cool metal instrument. How is he? His fever is a little lower than yesterday. Everyone around made a sound of relief. Sovietshu had collapsed after his fight with me, and while I did not think it was my fault, I was troubled. I could be relieved now as well. Thank you for coming immediately. Not at all, Your Majesty. It is only my duty. After the doctor and everyone else filed out of the room, I pulled over a chair to Sovietshu's bedside. He cracked open his eyes and fixed his gaze right on me, while I took a towel from a cold basin beside him, squeezed it, and placed it on his forehead. He flinched as soon as the towel touched his skin. It's cold, you're overworked. I heard I was awake when the doctor said that. Let's not waste this trip to the villa. I sighed as I remembered the sudden awkward kiss Sovietshu placed on me. Are you all right? You should take a break. He spoke brightly, but I could detect a note of tiredness. Nevertheless, I was happy he had more energy. I took the towel from his forehead, dipped it back in cold water, and placed it back on him. Cold Sovietshu groaned again, and then murmured an apology. Your birthday was ruined because of me, I'm sorry. We return here every year. Don't mind about it. I can't help but mind. There is next year's birthday. But your birthday is once this year. Talking to the empress is like talking to a colleague? Sovietshu pulled a face when I echoed his words. Do you know you're being somewhat unkind? Somewhat unkind? It was outright derision, I thought. The doctor said you had to rest for a few more days. Shall I call in Rashta? Sovietshu stared at me as if he couldn't believe what I said. I meant it this time. I knew he would rather have her take care of him than me. Of course, as I didn't want the three of us to be together, I would return to the imperial palace if she came. Wasn't this what Sovietshu wanted anyway? He only needed one person. Empress, are you being sarcastic? Does it sound that way? No, I answered with a single word and looked down, while Sovietshu flicked his eyes sideways towards me. You don't have to bring Rashta. I don't want you to be disappointed. But isn't this good for the Empress? Except whenever Rashta was upset, he always blamed me. On the other hand, if Rashta came here and I returned to the palace, it would actually be helpful. I had a lot of work to catch up to. Instead of answering, I placed more ice in the bowl, then took the towel from his forehead and soaked it again. I placed the cold towel on the back of his neck, and he jumped and grabbed my wrist. Are you angry with me? No, really. All right, stop glaring at me. He sighed, taking the towel off his neck and placing it on the quilt. Don't call Rashta. Was that really all right with him? When I looked up, I saw Sovietshu's eyelids drooping downwards. She's beautiful and charming when she talks, but I'm not comfortable with that now. I have a headache, so I'd like it to stay quiet. Rashta would be upset. Ever since she became his concubine, she made sure to never be far away from Sovietshu. I simply nodded and placed the cloth back on his forehead. My suspicion that Rashta would be upset was right. After a week's rest we returned to the imperial palace, and Rashta, who had been waiting in the garden, jumped inside the carriage before either of us could step out. Rashta locked Sovietshu into a fierce hug, while all she did for me was bow awkwardly. It was not unusual for a concubine to be seen by the Empress, but her attitude was different, considering she had been overly friendly to me before. While she couldn't bear being from Sovietshu, she seemed more concerned that he was alone with me. She and Sovietshu seemed unwilling to detach themselves from each other, so I went to the central palace alone and ordered the officials to bring me all my work that I had put off. Since then, daily life continued. I spent a little more time at the central palace catching up on a week's worth of work, while Sovietshu lessened his overtime hours following the doctor's advice. Rashta still clung to Duke Elgi during the day while taking care of Sovietshu at night. I sometimes ran into Prince Heinrich while going out for walks, and Queen brought back letters now and then. But there was one change. Sovietshu summoned me less to make outrageous accusations about Rashta. He's gotten back on track with affairs concerning her, and there was less reason to make demands. Thankfully, I didn't run into her often anymore, and I naturally became less fatigued even though my work increased. My heart was still sorrowful when it came to Sovietshu, but after a few years like this, perhaps we could be like a normal royal couple. We would live a moderately dull but peaceful life, without the worry of abandonment or renunciation. The next time I saw Rashta again was at a tea party hosted by Duchess Tania. Adjacent to the central palace was a small mansion called the Crystal House. The exterior was not made of crystal, as the name suggested, but with glass arranged at various angles that made the entire house sparkle with light. I heard that in the past, a concubine that was loved by the emperor lived here. Nowadays it was mainly lent to nobles for a day or two. It was the Crystal House that Duchess Tania borrowed to host her tea party, and today I was able to finish my work early and join her. I was afraid you were too busy to come, Your Majesty. Not at all. I greeted Duchess Tania and sat down at a table in the garden. There was a selection of tea and coffee at the table, as well as a range of cookies, cakes, and other delicacies covered with glass lids. The atmosphere was turning right for greeting the noblemen and women. Oh dear, we must be late. A voice came from the garden entrance. I looked past the cake, and saw a man with wavy blonde hair I had never seen before. Next to him was Rashta, who was being escorted by him. Oh, is that Duke Eliie? The man's eyes fell on me. He studied me for a moment, but I didn't turn away. Although Prince Heinle had warned me that Duke Eliie was like a living cursed doll, or a real ghost story, it would be strange if I suddenly avoided him. It was only a brief moment, but it felt like time had slowed down as the man smiled brightly and approached me. Your Majesty, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. You are Duke Eliie, Claudia? You recognized me right away? It was the first time I had met him, but he had a strikingly beautiful face that could not easily be forgotten. The man next to Rashta could only be Duke Eliie as well. The Duke bent his knee and reached out his hand. I placed my hand in his, and he offered a gentle kiss before letting me go with a faint upturn of his lips. I smiled ceremoniously and looked towards Duchess Tania. Duke Eliie was a well-known socialite, so it was unsurprising that she had invited him. What was more curious was that she had invited Rashta as well. However, as soon as I saw the look on Duchess Tania's face, I knew that she didn't intend Rashta to be here. Duke Eliie must have brought her as his partner. The fact was evident in the subsequent conversation between Duchess Tania and Duke Eliie. I didn't realize that Duke Eliie would bring Miss Rashta. I thought bringing Rashta to a socialite party such as yours would help Rashta too. Is that all right, my lady? I'm embarrassed that a man of renown like Duke Eliie would flatter me. While the two were exchanging reproaches disguised as greetings, Rashta bowed to me too, while I drank my tea with a silent acknowledgement. But I could not taste the tea at all. It was because of Rashta. Her presence alone made me want to leave. However, if I was seen avoiding Rashta, it would be the social gossip among the nobles for a week. I didn't want to be spoken of in the same sentence as her, and so I was forced to stay here until after few others had left. My worry only grew after Duke Eliie, finishing his intimate conversation with Duchess Tania, sat opposite me with Rashta. Fortunately, she and I didn't have the opportunity to exchange words. Did you hear about Baron Riven? I heard that he wanted his bastard son to be his successor, and the Baroness ended up divorcing him, right? Isn't the Baroness from the Chrome Kingdom? I heard she left with their children and went back to her family. Wasn't Baroness Riven the sister of Miss Elijah? What's she doing these days? I heard before New Year's. But as Duchess Tania was talking about Elijah's recent affairs, Rashta asked in a small voice, "Who is Elijah?" The question was not directed to the Duchess, but she seemed to have heard. Duchess Tania paused, while the person sitting next to Rashta replied in a mischievous voice. "She's Rashta's predecessor." Predecessor? She was once a concubine of the previous emperor. Rashta widened her eyes and blinked. If Miss Elijah's sister is a baroness, is Miss Elijah originally a noblewoman? Yes, it was at a ball that her and the previous emperor met. So how's Miss Elijah doing now? It was as if the atmosphere had been doused with cold water. Everyone stopped talking and focused their attention on Rashta. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with sympathy, yet others with spite. The person who answered Rashta didn't look happy and said, "Well, Miss Elijah, I heard she was forced to leave. What a pity." It was Duke Elgi who answered, and Rashta looked sideways in surprise. He smiled as Rashta stared at him, a crumple between her brows. The emperor quickly tired of Miss Elijah. She had the shortest time as concubine than any other concubine. It was all over so fast. Surely Duke Elgi knew that it was not a story for someone like Rashta. However, he was completely calm, and smiled as he took a sip of tea. Rashta blinked her large eyes. She had been upset when I once mentioned another concubine after her. It must have been unthinkable back then, but now she was confronted with a concubine who had taken the same road as hers and had a bad ending. Rashta was completely frozen, and some nobles turned their eyes towards her in pity. I thought Rashta would remain tight-lipped, but instead of staying silent, she quickly erased the surprise on her face and spoke, her face red. "I hear that the nobles have many lovers. It seems to be true." Some jumped in to sympathize with her. "There are some couples with no other lovers. There are not many like Countess Eliza. Political marriages are more the norm." Rashta nodded one at each of their words and smiled back. Right, of course. Actually, Rashta was very surprised when she heard that the Duchess Tania had 5 lovers. But now that I heard it is natural, I feel like I'm going through a new world. This time there was a wave of silence. Everyone's mouth was open. Duchess Tania's fork clinked down on her plate. Rashta turned red, covering her mouth with her hands. "Was it something I shouldn't say? I'm sorry." "It's not something you should say, because it's ridiculous nonsense, Miss Rashta." Duchess Tania's voice was as dangerous as thin ice. Rashta repeatedly apologized, but the Duchess' face did not soften. "I'm sorry, my lady. Miss Rashta is not used to the etiquette of the nobility. She's only repeating what she heard." When Duke Elgi sided with Rashta again, Duchess Tania finally stood up. "I find it unbearable that there are 2 people so rude that they cannot even observe etiquette. Especially you, Duke Elgi. If you wanted to bring someone who didn't know how to behave, you should have taught them the least bit of pretense. Rudeness is worse than pretense. Are you angry? Yes? Today's party ends here. I'm sorry to have brought you to this strange occasion, Your Majesty." The stronger the light, the more visible the shadows. Duchess Tania had reigned as a pillar of high society for 20 years, and as such had accumulated many enemies. However, with all her laurels and repute, even they couldn't speak ill of her. They remained quiet, but were always anxious to talk about her faults. Rashta's comments in front of Duchess Tania yesterday afternoon had given them the ammunition they needed. Those who secretly hated the Duchess gathered in Rashta's reception room to laugh and gossip. Actually, Miss Rashta complained a little after hearing Duchess Tania's words. To be honest, does she truly have only 5 lovers? How many men chase after her? Are they all unrequited loves? The Duchess does get around. The real Empress always sits quietly, while Duchess Tania always carries her head as if she were the queen of society. To them Rashta was like a shield. Someone who could speak out plainly and badly against Duchess Tania, but who would not be ignored by society. All they had to do was to air their catty remarks behind the shield that was Rashta. Rashta only said what she heard. To be honest, the rumors have been around for a while. I couldn't speak about them because I didn't have the right words, and I was afraid of being caught by the Duchess followers. Aren't those followers strange too? The nobles whispered with Rashta in the middle, and it was not until 3 or 4 hours later that they stood up. How did Rashta do? As soon as they left, Rashta approached Duke Elgi, who had been watching the conversation from the sidelines. He smiled, lowering his eyes. "Well done, miss." Rashta twisted her body back and forth at his compliment. "It's all right, yes, nice start. But will people turn away from Duchess Tania?" "No, not too much at the moment right now, just this. Checking to see if there are any complaints. Stirring things up." "Oh, then what should I do now?" As Duke Elgi looked at Rashta's naive expression, he burst into laughter and rose from his chair. "You can do it all by yourself from now on, right? Rashta doesn't like this, as I said, Mississippi." He approached Rashta, then leaned down and whispered in her ear. "You're cute, but I told you it's hard to deceive me in areas like this." Rashta shot him a look of loathing and Duke Eliie chuckled. "I'm not insulting you, so don't be upset." Rashta pouted and raised her eyebrows. Duke Eliie opened the door of the reception room and walked out into the hallway. "Where are you going?" Rashta ran to his side, and he turned and shook his head. "I'm going out for a while, you don't have to come." "I'm not going for a stroll, where just wait." About 4 to 6 times a year a massive public ball was held, an event where even commoners could attend. I was in the middle of a long conversation with the culture minister to decide on the date. He hurriedly excused himself to go to the bathroom, and I stepped outside the office for a moment to relieve my fatigued eyes. "I'll take a walk." I stared down the long corridor and began to walk slowly, hoping to relax. After only a few steps, however, I noticed Duke Eliie leaning on a pillar not far away. Why was he standing there? When I stopped and looked at him, he smiled and straightened himself to bow to me. "I've been waiting here for 3 hours. You must be very busy." His wavy, golden hair swayed with his bow. I became all the more curious. He waited 3 hours just to see me? I tried to remember if he had a prearranged meeting with me. If it was urgent, he should have sent someone to give a report. "How can I help you?" Duke Eliie smiled and murmured, straight to the main point. "Very good, quick. Do you happen to know I'm a friend of Heinlei's?" "I heard you heard." "You heard it. What on earth did he come here to say?" Duke Eliie mumbled heard to himself and suddenly frowned and looked down at the floor. An awkward silence passed. He stood there for about 3 minutes before he spoke again. "I've heard from Heinleie a few times about you, Your Majesty." "Did Heinleie say anything about me?" "Not often, but once. And it wasn't flattering." "I haven't heard much." I answered him honestly, and he fixed me with his gaze as he took a couple steps closer. "Did he say anything strange?" "Strange, anything unpleasant?" "Heinleie did, but I couldn't answer that." I shook my head and said no, while Duke Eliie sighed and placed his hand on his forehead. "It's just the way he is. He always says bad things about me to someone he likes. Prince Heinleie, he's been telling people I'm a cursed doll, or a living ghost story. It's a lie, so there's no need for you to pay attention to it. I don't know why you're saying this to me, or your intentions. When I saw you yesterday, I didn't think you would socialize with people like Heinleie." "What kind of person is that?" "The same kind as Heinleie and me. Someone who's frivolous." Yesterday I had only smiled and nodded my head, and barely opened my mouth to say hello. When the tea party was cut short, I left. He had barely seen me and decided what kind of person I was from that. But if there is a difference, Heinleie is a man who wants someone to be his complete opposite, and as for me, I'm a frivolous man who wants to get along with frivolous people. Does that mean I'm not fit to be the prince's friend? No, I'm here to give you some advice. Advice? Heinleie is a two-faced man, Your Majesty. He says one thing in front of you, and does something different from behind. He can both smile and hurt people. Don't trust the sweets he offers. Aren't you Prince Heinlei's close friend? Why would Prince Heinleie and Duke Eliie speak ill of each other? As soon as I spoke, Duke Eliie smiled nonchalantly. It was Heinleie who called me here in the first place. Didn't he say that? He shook his head and continued. For a few years Heinlei's been setting up. Before he could finish speaking, there was a knock on the wall. I turned around, and saw Soviétchu staring at me and Duke Eliie. Another foreigner again. Duke Eliie bowed at Soviétchu and left with an innocent smile. As soon as Duke Eliie was gone, Soviétchu turned to face me. I think it's clear by now. A man from the Western Kingdom, another from Wit, and another from Blue Bohemian. You clearly have a preference for foreigners, don't you? His mad speculation returned. I had been hoping that everything would stay quiet. Soviétchu frowned and pointed at the Duke's retreating back. You don't have much experience with other men besides myself. Just because he speaks with a silver tongue it doesn't mean he's a good man. On the contrary, Duke Eliie was a man of blunt speech, but instead of correcting Soviétchu I looked at him dumbfoundedly. Then what kind of man is a good man? If he had a conscience, he would not say himself. But Soviétchu had no conscience. Me really? I lifted my eyebrow at him, and his expression turned disgruntled as he sighed. Anyway, I want you to be careful in your behavior. And I will look for a handsome, youthful Eastern Kingdom man. He stared at me silently, then mumbled yes and left. I sighed. I couldn't fathom what was in Soviet's head. It didn't matter to him that he brought Rashta, but he didn't want to hear that the imperial couple had other lovers? Your Majesty, were you looking for me? As I pressed my hand against my temple, the minister hurried over from the bathroom. I'm sorry, my digestive system has been working up lately. It's fine. We went back into the office, but I found it difficult to concentrate, and I eventually cut the meeting short. We'll talk again tomorrow. Let's go get some rest today. Oh, very good. I can't concentrate very well either, so don't worry about it. After the minister left, I sat with my arms crossed and stared at the stack of documents on the table. Sovietshu was being Sovietshu. But what did the Duke Eliie mean? What had Prince Heinrich been setting up for years? It couldn't be a building. A plan? The word plan would make sense. I would have to ask Prince Heinrich. He had called Duke Eliie here, and yet both of them were trading disparaging remarks about the other. It was strange. Your Majesty, does this feel good? Your Majesty, is this good? Your Majesty. Rashta stopped kneading Sovietshu's shoulder when he failed to answer her repeated questions. She leaned her head over his shoulder, and Sovietshu, startled, turned his head sideways, causing their lips to almost brush against each other's. Rashta smiled, lightly kissed his cheek, and hugged him. What are you thinking about that you won't listen to Rashta? Her voice was charming, but it contained a pout. Oh, I'm sorry if it's about national matters. Rashta can't help much. After apologizing, she shrugged her shoulders and then sat down at the table across from him. Sovietshu shook his head. It's not about national matters. What is it? Rashta spoke in half-absent-minded voice. Sovietshu usually didn't share his day's work with Rashta. He told her whenever he felt like it, which wasn't often, so she asked him without thinking. However, he pitched his own question. Come to think of it, Rashta, Duke Eliie gets along with you, doesn't he? Duke Eliie, why did Sovietshu bring him up all of a sudden? Rashta replied, puzzled. He's close to Rashta. What is it? His next question was even more surprising. Is Duke Eliie close to the Empress? Rashta winced slightly. Why are you asking? I saw the pair of them having friendly conversation this afternoon. Sovietshu gave a low exhale. Earlier, Rashta told him that Duke Eliie had left for a while, and that she hadn't seen him for hours. He didn't say where he went. So he must have gone to the Empress. Rashta remembered Duke Elie's confident and playful proposal to tempt her. Is he really trying to seduce the Empress for me? Rashta silently pursed her lips. Not for me. He must have done it for himself. She was somewhat offended, and Sovietshu noticed and called out to her in a strange voice. Rashta hurriedly smiled. No, the Empress doesn't get along with the Duke Eliie. Is that so? Yes, Duke Eliie is a friend of Rashta's. At her quick reply, Sovietshu smiled at her adoringly. What, you truly are gentle and kind. Are you defending the Empress just because I might misunderstand her? Oh, you noticed. Rashta covered her face with her hands, and Sovietshu nodded and hummed. You're not wearing the ring I gave to you, are you? Ring. Rashta lowered her hands. Despite her pretty face, her hands were ugly and coarse due to the hardships in her childhood. When Sovietshu had seen the roughness in her hands, his eyes trembled. Sovietshu leaned over to take Rashta's fingers. A silver ring with a red jewel in it. Do you remember? Oh, yes. The red jewel is known as the Red Flame Star. Rashta recalled the 3 rings that Sovietshu had given her. One of them must have been a silver ring with a red jewel. She thought it was the cheapest because it was the smallest, but it must have quite a reputation to have its own name. Don't you like it? Rashta's expression twisted as she realized she gave the precious ring to the person she hated the most. I'm not trying to pressure you if you don't like it. But there's a spell on the jewel. The effect isn't obvious if you put it on for a short time, but wear it for longer, and eventually it will remove the scars. The ring was magical. Rashta dropped her head onto the table with a thump. Rashta, what a waste. Sovietchu stared at her, and she groaned into the wood. I found a poor maid and gave it to her. I didn't know it was that kind of ring. After staring at her in short surprise, Sovietchu burst into laughter. What haha, Rashta wanted to cry. Your Majesty, is there another ring with that same effect? There is, but if Rashta asks you for another one, is that all right? Well, if you want a similar one, then very well. Could she have it now? When Rashta stared at him with enormous eyes, and Sovietchu smiled awkwardly. The Empress has one. As soon as Viscount Rotesha visited the next day, Rashta hounded him about the ring. What did you do with the ring Rashta gave you? Viscount Rotesha was assaulted with a barrage of questions before he could even seat himself. What did you do with the ring? I sold it. You sold it. Why not? It doesn't involve you anymore. Rashta had been willing to trade for it if he still had it, and she let out a frustrated. I sold it for more money than I expected. I thought you gave a cheap ring on purpose, but you have done well for me. Rashta's blood pressure rose even more at Viscount Rotesha's vile smile. However, the ring was out of her hands now. Sovietchu had to obtain a new one. Rashta mentally counted backwards from 10, then pointed her finger at a chair across the table. Sit down, no more of your impudence. Rashta was uncharacteristically angry about the ring, but he wasn't intimidated. If you are on the same side as you say, you will no longer be in the lead. Don't be so rude to Rashta. Viscount Rotesha shot her an irritated look, but as Rashta took out her fan and began to cool herself, his anger subsided as he saw the jewels flashing on the fan. It wouldn't be long before he acquired those as well. Smiling in anticipation, Viscount Rotesha took his place with a screech of his chair. Yes, you're right. We're like colleagues now. Rashta stared at him with a contemptuous look, but he continued. Have you made up your mind? My patience is running out. You have to convince me first. With what you said you would help Rashta. Whether you're truly helping or not, show your ability. Ability? Rashta snapped the fan into her palm. You said you would reveal my baby if I didn't cooperate. But if you ruin our arrangement even when we're on the same side, it would still be a loss for you. So you have to at least show me your ability. So what kind of skills do you want to see? Find out a weakness of Duchess Tania's. Something that could start a bad rumor. I had dinner twice a week with Sovietchu, and that was today. I recalled our unpleasant conversation yesterday, but I couldn't avoid him. I changed from my diplomatic clothing into a comfortable light blue dress and headed towards the Eastern Palace. To avoid any awkward conversations, I carefully ran over the words I wanted to say. As I walked down the hall towards the room where I would have my meal, I ran into Rashta. The aftermath of the villa was still unchanged, and Rashta bowed carefully and stepped aside. I'm glad you aren't pretending to be friendly and calling me sister anymore. This distance was acceptable to me. I took a few steps past her when she spoke. Excuse me, Your Majesty. Rashta quietly called to me from behind. I stopped and turned around, but she hesitated. What is it? It was as if Rashta's words were caught in her throat. What was she trying to say? With a frown she slowly began to speak. Your Majesty has Prince Heinley a close friend. Why was she talking about Prince Heinley all of a sudden? She once claimed that she was his letter acquaintance. Was she trying to pull something again? However, what Rashta said next took me by surprise. So please don't touch Duke Elgi. Why would I bother with him? She thinks I would touch Duke Elgi? An exhale escaped from my mouth. I don't know what you're talking about. When I was in trouble, he was the only one on my side who listened to me and trusted me. So please don't be offended. Your Majesty, you have so many friends, so please don't take my only one. I won't. I didn't know why she misunderstood me, but the idea was completely ridiculous, and I immediately cut it down. I don't know why this concerns you, but do not worry. Duke Elgi is not my friend. Rashta smiled in visible relief. As it said, what? You've coveted what was mine, but I haven't coveted what was yours. I'm not so deprived that I have to take from someone else. A look of distress flashed on Rashta's face, but I ignored it. I brushed past her with a look as cold as Sovietchu's. When I entered Sovietchu's room, his secretary, Count Pernu, was already inside. I was unsure if they were deep in a long conversation, but Soviétchik was sitting in front of the table while Count Pernu was standing beside him. I saw quietly opposite of Soviétchik, thinking that the Count would leave soon given that he already had his hat in hand. Soviétchik wouldn't have allowed him to come here in the first place if he didn't mind being overheard. A ring with healing magic, correct? Yes. Are necklaces, bracelets, and swords acceptable? No, it should be a ring. No, a bracelet is fine too. Very well, they're extremely rare, and the search will be very wide. Find one anyway, and as soon as you do, buy it. Yes, Your Majesty. Count Pernu gave a low bow to Soviétchik and I, then left the room with the close of the door. Soviétchik smiled in my direction and rang a bell to summon the servants. They had been waiting beforehand, and immediately brought in a lavish dinner of grilled goose skewers, stew, and bread with cheese. After the servants left, I directed the conversation to the scene from earlier. Don't you already have a ring with a healing spell, Your Majesty? Oh yes, but I don't have it now, I see. He didn't seem to want to tell me why it was gone. Instead of questioning him further, I ate a spoonful of stew. I thought I was relieved to find a topic of conversation, but now I was at a complete blank. The room lay in complete silence, as we had been taught at an early age to not make loud sounds with our utensils against the dishes. Only after emptying his bowl of stew did Soviétchik speak. Empress, if you don't mind, can you lend me the desert flower until I find a new ring? The desert flower was my ring obtained from a trader who returned from Wit. It had been handed down through the generations by the desert tribe's greatest warriors, and also contained a powerful healing spell. I didn't use it much, so I didn't mind lending it to him. However, my gaze unknowingly turned to Soviétchik's smooth hands. It had neither a scratch nor scar. Do you truly need it? Soviétchik answered bluntly. I just want to lend it to someone who has injured hands. Who is it? Let me borrow the ring and I promise to return it. Rashta's hands must be rough. Soviétchik's eyes widened. I set my fork down, then wiped my mouth with a napkin and smiled at him. You don't need to use it on yourself. You can't lend it to other nobles out of the blue, and you can't sell anything you borrow. You're certain that you can get it back? Surely the person you want to give it to must be Rashta. Soviétchik stared at me in silence, then sheepishly placed his forehead in his hand. He gave a long sigh. Won't you lend it to me? I will really, however, there is a condition. A condition. Please lend me one of your magical items as collateral. Soviétchik gave a shocked laugh. Do you think I will not return it? No, but I may have a person I want to lend it to. To lend it to who? Did you not tell me yesterday? You didn't want me to associate with foreigners, so I will look at our young countrymen instead. Soviétchik's face stiffened. So you will lend the Emperor's items to a young countryman? I nodded my head and coolly took a sip of my water. It was a lie, but if he was going to take my ring, I needed security. Soviétchik threw me a dirty look and stood up. If you don't want to lend it to me, just say no. I'll pretend this didn't happen. I couldn't finish my bowl of stew after that, but I was still hungry. I'll have to ask Countess Eliza for some ice cream. I would feel a little better after I ate. Perhaps it was satisfaction from Soviétchik's twisted expression, but my stomach felt less upset than when he accused me of spreading rumors about Rashta being a runaway slave, or when he thought I brought Viscount Roteshu. I was walking through the Western Palace when I spotted a couple of figures. Prince Heinrich, Queen. Prince Heinrich was standing and holding Queen. My heart lifted as I approached them, but I discovered that I was mistaken. That is not Queen, is it? The bird was a little smaller than Queen, and his feathers were blue instead of gold. Its face was completely different as well. This is Queen's underling. Underling, not his friend. He is his friend, but officially he's an underling. Prince Heinrich smiled as he patted the bird's head. The bird made a disgruntled expression, and I chuckled. Prince Heinrich's birds are all very expressive. Is that so? Queen has a surprised face and a shy face. I reached out and touched the bird's head. He, too, was very gentle in nature and remained still, even though he was being touched by a stranger. He has a grumpy face. He always looks like this. He always has a face like I don't want to do that. At the end of Prince Heinrich's words, the bird turned even sulkier, but the bird was so cute that I kept stroking him. Can I hold him? I assumed I could, but Prince Heinle answered with surprising firmness. That's not possible, you can't hold him. Yes, he didn't seem willing to explain further, and I nodded. I would also like to raise a bird of my own. The bird looked so pitiful that I touched its neck, and Prince Heinle suddenly stepped back. When I looked up, he smiled softly. I think the bird is anxious to go back to the room. He looks calm, his heart is beating louder. He's actually a shy and cowardly creature, unlike the brave queen. I didn't know if the blue bird was a coward, but he was certainly glowering at Prince Heinle. Instead of deigning the prince with his displeasure, however, the bird stood up and wearily flew away. I've never seen such a spiritless bird. He's always like that. Is he sick? He's fine, he's just complaining. Complaining what for? Indeed, am I in trouble because I stopped the empress from giving him a hug? I didn't know if he was talking to himself or asking me. Prince Heinle had an unusual look on his face as he stared at the bird's back with his arms folded. Then, as if he felt my gaze on him, he turned and smiled at me. I'll have to ask him later why he's angry. Can you talk to birds? Yes, he's probably angry because I stopped the empress from hugging him, and he's going to hit me 10 times on the rear. I burst out laughing. What is it? Oh, I was reminded of Queen. What I sometimes pat Queen on the rear. He has a cute behind. Oh, thank you? Why was Prince Heinle so red? I looked at him quizzically, but his eyes refused to meet mine. Was it because I was so plainly talking about rears? With a face that red, he really wasn't a playboy as the rumors suggested. He is surprisingly pure. I thought he would laugh, but I didn't continue because he was so embarrassed. I quickly changed the subject. I remembered I wanted to ask you something, Prince Heinle. Prince Heinle looked at me with one hand covering his flamed cheek. Yes, asked me, Queen. I met Duke Eliie yesterday. I see he frowned as if he disapproved of the encounter. Did he disrespect you? Not at all, that is a blessing. Instead, he said something strange. What do you mean? Prince Heinle's expression was tense. I'm not sure I can tell him the bad names, can I? Duke Eliie said he was a frivolous man? While Duke Eliie and Prince Heinle were best friends in name, I doubted that relationship right now. Instead, I asked about something else. He said it was you who called him here. Yes, he also said you've been setting up something for years. This is just the beginning, stay tuned for what's coming next. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting content. See you in the next one.